towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. So the question is about levels of initiation and what those things mean and how they work in different Sufi orders. And Piro Murshid Inayat Khan did a brilliant job of describing and laying out a lot of the nuts and bolts, to use your phrase, about the system and process of Sufism. And he was really creating a structure that worked for him and for the people in the community, the students that he was supporting in his lifetime 100 years ago, 110 years ago. And so he was very explicit in describing first, like what initiation is, and that means the first initiation. And he put the first initiation at the beginning of the path, not at the end, not after years of study, not after culminating in whatever, but he said that initiation is the beginning. It's in the word itself. To initiate something is to start something. And so he often referred to a quote from a very famous Sufi, Al-Ghazali, who said that initiation is like shooting an arrow in the dark. That you have the arrow, you have a target in mind, but you don't see the target. You just have a sense of direction. You have all of your energy that you put into the bow, and then you let it go with trust, with confidence that the direction that you're going is the direction that you feel great optimism about. So that's initiation itself. That's the first initiation. Then Murshid described a system of initiations that happen if someone is actually studying and engaging with the Sufi path very sincerely, very diligently, then there are 3 years that are the beginning stages. That's the first, second, and third initiations that are given one per year after 1 year of study and practice with first the gathas. This isn't what you asked about, but I'm getting there. So Murshid said that doing initiations after periods of time and study and engagement encourages a murid along the path, that it incentivizes someone to continue progressing, to continue engaging and moving forward. So first year of study is the first gathas and a set of practices and prayers. Second year of study, second set of gathas. Third year, third set of gathas. So the first 3 initiations are the first 3 years on the path, and those 3 are the periods of accumulating knowledge. That's how he described it. The first 3 years are just about learning things, gathering things. The next 3 initiations, 4, 5, and 6, are studying and working with the Gitas. That is the sets of papers for the Gitas. The first Gitas, second Gitas, third Gitas, fourth initiation, fifth, sixth initiations. And all of those ones are the phase of integrating, of assimilating. Excuse me. And that's the second phase of being on the path. Assimilating, integrating, making the teachings and the practices a part of your being, a part of your being. Then you have initiation levels 7, 8, 9, and those ones are studying the Sangatas. That is another 3 sets of papers, Sangatas, with an initiation at the end of each of those years, 7, 8, 9. And at 9, the 9th level of initiation is the completion of the responsibility or the obligation. It is the completion of the phase of being a student. um, sort of, because everyone is a student for life. And so everyone is always a murid. Once a murid, always a murid. And um, so that's important too. Now, traditionally, in Sufi orders, in a Sufi context, the third phase is the phase of sharing, of beginning to disseminate the message, that is beginning to teach it, to offer it to others, that you've learned everything, you've assimilated everything, now it's time to share it with others. So those are the three major phases: initiations 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9. Now, at 9, there's an empowerment or a freedom and acknowledgement. That's why Murshid called the ninth initiation Sufi. At that point, you're actually a Sufi. That means that you have mastery, understanding, knowledge, integration, that you have a stability and a foundation with the teachings, with the lineage, and now you are empowered independently to leave the order and to go and start something new, to go and share something. That is the initiation of empowerment, of autonomy and sovereignty and freedom. Beyond that, right, so in you were asking specifically about the Ruhaniyat. The ninth level is the level of a teacher. That is the level that empowers someone to be able to initiate students and to guide their own murids. Beyond the ninth level, there's also the 10th level and an 11th and a 12th. And this is in the system that Piro Murshid Inayat Khan gave. So ninth is Sufi. 10th is either Sheikh or Khalif. And those are two different names that the Ruhaniyat uses to indicate someone who is empowered as a teacher and has demonstrated a longevity of experience, of integrated knowledge. And there isn't a new empowerment that comes with that level, but the words Sheikh and Khalif are both used for the 10th level of initiation, and they indicate a different direction or a different quality of someone's integration and capacity. In general, this is not a rule across the board, but in general, in the Ruhaniyat, a sheikh is someone who has some creative license and integrates some other teachings and teaches in some kind of creative, innovative ways. And a khalif is someone who teaches everything with an integrity toward the source, toward Inayat Khan's teachings, that is someone who tends to teach more from his wisdom perspectives, the traditional teachings. That is, the Khalif is the holder of the lineage in its integrity without watering it or changing it or shaping it into new forms in general. So those are the 10th. In the Ruhaniyat, the 11th is the level of Murshid. And in the Ruhaniyat, there is a body of murshids or murshidas, that is the people who are holding a particular quality of responsibility, of advising and supporting the peer and the decisions and directions of the organization. So it's a kind of big steering committee, guidance committee. Then there is the 12th, which is the peer, that is the head of the organization. And in the language itself, peer means elder. It means the person who has the most experience and the most responsibility and is really holding the weight of the organization and the community. Okay. Those are the 12 levels that are acknowledged in the Ruhaniyat. They are also the 12 levels that were given by Piro Murshid Inayat Khan. That's the system that he designed with the curriculum of study, practice, and empowerments along the way. Different orders do things in different ways. And even in the history of the orders, the lineage streams that trace their roots and inspiration to Pir O Murshid Inayat Khan, each of them has their own ways of handling things and working with the initiations. Um, it is really rare, in my experience, to see people actually give first and then second and then third, fourth, fifth, sixth initiations. That used to be more of a thing from what I've heard historically in the last 100 years, that there have been some people and some orders that do systematic initiations, one per year with study and practice, but I have never seen that happen. And so if there's anybody that is doing that in any of the orders now, I am not aware of it. It is more likely, from what I've seen, that people go, here's the first initiation. Congratulations, welcome, you're a Murid and officially included in the Sufi family. And then at some point, someone will say, I'm going to do a training for people that are only for fifth level and above. And someone wants to do that training and goes to their teacher and says, this is only for fifths and above. And the teacher says, well, you're definitely at least a fifth. Alhamdulillah, ya fatah, and go forth as a fifth level initiate. That happens for sure. I, for example, went from first to ninth, and there were no interim initiations. And that is common. That is probably the most common that happens, that someone's initiated and then they're initiated as a teacher. Okay. Sirati Inayat is a different order that we created our own system of how we're going to work with things, and this was part of our process 3.5, almost 4 years ago now, coming up on 4 years, alhamdulillah. And there were 10 of us that were the visioning committee or the visioning circle, I think we called it, for creating all of the infrastructure and how we were going to work Sirati Inayat as a different Sufi order. We decided that the numbered initiation systems do nothing but cause problems for people in their ego structures and their competitions and their comparisons and their aspirations, and we wanted to try to avoid as much of that as we possibly can. And we took our lead from Pir Vilayat, who was head of the Sufi order that was the older son of Inayat Khan. And at some point, Vilayat was working with the numbers of initiations, would give people certain numbers of initiation. And then at some point, he realized that it was causing nothing but strife and bickering and competition amongst Murids. So he got rid of them. And he was like, we're not going to do numbers anymore. So nobody gets a number. You're an initiate or you're not. You're a teacher or you're not, but no numbers. So we, Sirati Inayat, no numbers. There's initiation as a Murid into the esoteric school for anyone who wishes and chooses a teacher that they would like to receive initiation from. The next initiation that is available is for a teacher, and we call the teacher the Sheikh, because that's the word that Inayat Khan used for a teacher who is empowered to give initiations and guide Murids. So the people in Sirati Inayat who can offer initiations and guide Murids are called Sheikh. We spelled it in the way that Murshid spelled it, because that's also spelled different ways. So we spell it Shaikh, Sheikh. We put an A on the end for the women who wish to have an A on the end of it to make it distinctly feminine. Then, aside from Sheikh, there's the Pir, and that is the person who is holding the responsibility for the organization. And right now, that's me. And though we chose the term Pir O Murshid or Pir O Murshida in the form because that's the title that Inayat Khan used for it, he called himself the Pir O Murshid. He was the founder of his Sufi order. So I am the Pir O Murshida of Sirati Inayat. We, as a group, decided that that was the most appropriate name, label, title for it. In a silly way, because I'm kind of silly about it. In most of our bylaws and formal paperwork, we call it the POM, P, lowercase o, uppercase M, POM, because it's cute. Did that answer your question? Bet it did. Okay, then, do we have time to touch into the stages of consciousness? I don't know. I didn't actually keep track of what time we started this thing. Um, I will tell you that there are different systems about the levels of consciousness that, um, and you can find different things if you do a Google search for them. And if you put in a number, you could say, like, what are the 5 stages of consciousness? You can find those. If you say, what are the 6 stages? You can find those. If you go, what are the 7 stages? You can find those. I think you can find even systems that have 9 of them. You could probably find systems that only have 3 of them. So it, it's important to note different tarikats, different Sufi schools have different ways of teaching and thinking about things and describing things. And so, I think that it's important not to get too attached, like, this is the way it is and this is the number that there are. That, well, having some flexibility or at least some tolerance and understanding that there are different ways of thinking about that. Um, I can go through the forms that Murshid gave for them because that's probably the most interesting for most of you who are paying attention to Piro Murshid Naya Khan. So I just did a very quick little search on Wahiduddin's website. If you haven't found wahiduddin.org.net, sorry, wahiduddin.net, tons of resources that are very easy to search. Murshid said, in Sufi terms, there are 5 stages of consciousness: Nasut, Malakut, Jabarut, Lahut, Hahut. You probably want to see those things. Hold on a second. I will put them in the chat window for you because I like you. There you go. Now, he goes into descriptions about them to some extent, but at some point he kind of bails on giving descriptions about them. What I find interesting and probably the most useful is to think that they go from the lowest stages of consciousness and values and perceptions about the world and ourselves into the highest stages. So it's a process where we go from, really, you could think about it like our most dense survival needs about being very identified with the earth plane, with everything about our human existence and our animal bodies and our coarse, dense experience and existence. Murshid would use the word gross, but it's the same thing. That is the dense experiences of us feeling hunger and feeling the fight and flight responses to danger, and identifying entirely with our physical bodies and our earth plane experiences. And then they work their way up. So Malakut is more the level of the angels. That is one of the words that is associated with the roots of Malak. That is of mastery and of a wider view. And Jabarut is more about the level of the ideas and the concepts and the creativity and magic. And Lahut is more the realms of the etheric, where everything becomes dispersed and open and very floaty and nothing grounded to hold on to. That is very conceptual and vast. And then Hahut is the realm of God consciousness that has no identifying characteristics at all, that is completely dissolved in the vast infinite. All right, so there's a general way of thinking about it. And now it's time to pause the recording. I lied. So I'm not pausing yet because I want to tell you that I found these particular things are in the supplementary papers on mysticism, and I can actually put a link to Wahiduddin's page in the chat window if you find that interesting and want to read more and more about it. Towards the one, united with all. Wali Ali gave that as a darood that Murshid Sam often said towards the one on every breath, inhalation toward the one, exhalation toward the one. And then I don't know if he did this or if Wali Ali started it, but I remember being with Wali Ali and him giving that instruction of doing towards the one on the exhalation, united with all on the inhalation, and then flipping that, breathing in towards the one, breathing out, united with all. It works both ways. But he also, Wali Ali also, gave the entire invocation as a Darood breath concentration, where you start with a big exhalation and then you breathe in, concentrating on toward the one united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment, no, towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being. And then you breathe out, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. So it's one long breath of the whole invocation, inhalation, exhalation. That was an aside. Okay, so um, when someone chooses initiation, it can be for so many reasons. So many reasons. And they're all good reasons. That, well, they're not all good reasons. There are some that are not good reasons. But in general, if someone is choosing initiation with sincerity, it's for a good reason. And I've heard a lot of personal stories and wishes, intentions, and desires around initiation. Um, there is certainly one of, I wanted to make it official. That is people who hang out with the Sufis for a while, who hang out with a particular teacher or some teachers for a while, are part of this sense of family, engage in the practices, engage in the study and the learning, and that feel resonant with the Sufi path. And there are a lot of people who hang out with Sufis and don't wish to be formally connected with anything, either don't find the teacher that they resonate with, or don't like organizations, or don't, or are not joiners. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I'm not a joiner. A lot of people who really value and hold tight to an independence or a sense of separateness for whatever reason, or maybe that are part of some other kind of esoteric school or teaching or community, or maybe they work with some other teacher. But it is common that people will hang out with the Sufis and not have a formal connection, not have an official affiliation. And um, it does happen that when that happens after a while, that someone will decide that they actually really want that official recognition, welcome, acknowledgement, whatever blessings or validation or sense of belonging or connection with a particular teacher, and or they want to feel open to receive the blessings of the lineage of the generations of teachers, or um, all kinds of things. So those things happen. Um, and all of that is fine. It's also fine to not choose that formal, official connection. That there are plenty of people who never decide officially to join anything or connect into anything, and that's fine too. And there is also an accommodation for an initiation of friendship that happens in some Sufi orders. I don't know about all Sufi orders, where a blessing can be given, an acknowledgement that someone is part of the community, even if they haven't chosen a formal initiation or chosen to be connected with a specific teacher. And um, so that's available also. Okay. Next question is, how is the development of a murid recognized? How does someone determine when someone is ready for a higher initiation? I have had a hard time with that question for, I don't know, at least 1.5 decades, at least 15 years, maybe longer, probably longer than that. Um, in some ways, I don't think you can. In some ways, I think that the individual soul and the individual development is entirely between that individual and the spirit of guidance and God. And I also have a sense that when when we move along the journey and have our own deepened, expanded experience and perception, we are able to perceive some things. Piro Murshid Inayat Khan did describe some of the qualities and characteristics that define when someone is ready for higher initiations, and they're very um, they're very conceptual words and descriptors about integration of stages of consciousness, integration of the teachings, attunement to the teacher, um, an ability to experience and attain perspectives. It's a lot about the wisdom that is integrated and the spiritual capacities of the individual that um, you can't you can't really see directly firsthand, but you can get a sense of them. I have often thought that in order to recognize an illuminated being, one has to be an illuminated being. And since I am not an illuminated being, I will never be able to recognize an illuminated being. And uh, I feel okay with that. I also think that it is possible for each of us to be able to perceive ourselves to some extent, and also not to a particularly clear extent. And it is helpful to have others that are able to witness and assess how we're doing. And in those ways, it is important for teachers to be really honest about their capacity for perception, and to also be dedicated and diligent about their own attainment and development. And also for all of us as murids to choose the teachers and the wisdom beings that we have a really clear, honorable confidence in those beings' perceptions of us. So there is a lot in the Sufi traditions that are about um, sharing the journey, and sharing the journey under the guidance of beings that we trust and that we respect and that we have great confidence in. So, um, probably my best advice would be to choose carefully. I just spent a few days with my teacher Ramat, who I love, and throughout the entire time that we were there, and in my days of reflecting post retreat, I don't know how many times I've said, I chose really well. I chose really well. And I'm grateful. And, uh, and I hope that for every one of us, for every one of you, that you can look at the teachers and the beings that you choose to trust and that you have confidence in, and that you can rest in a really solid, consistent knowing that you chose really well. And it's always to the best of our ability. based on our own lens, based on our own personalities, based on our own needs and capacities. And we can only choose the teachers that we recognize and that resonate with who we are and how we are right now. And there's a limitation around that. And and that's okay. We just do the best we can and hope that the teachers that we choose are doing the best they can. It's good to remember that we're all students and there's really ultimately only one teacher, and that's God. And the human beings who are holding that role for us in our lives are doing their best to help us connect in with the one teacher that is God. How do we move from one state of consciousness to another at will? Inayat Khan blamed that entirely on the breath. That's probably not the right phrasing for it. There are so many disciplines and practices and approaches that include all of the core, um, the spiritual tools of the lineage. And all of them help us recognize and attain and experience the different stages of consciousness to the extent of our ability. And that includes namaz, that is the formal prayer practice. It includes zikr and fikr, the remembrance of God, aloud and silently. It includes wazifa practices, that is recitation and relationship with the beautiful names of God as we understand and experience them. It includes the breath practices of qasab or kasab and shuggle or shagal. People say them different ways. That is shaping the breath according to our will and turning our attention and energy from the outer to the inner. It includes developing concentration, discipline of the mind, and meditation. That is being able, and Murshid uses the word meditation in a very unique way that is not what most of us think about as meditation. That all of the practices help us discover and develop a relationship with these different experiences, qualities, and planes of consciousness within ourselves. And when we discover them, we can, I describe it or think about it as we can drop an anchor in them so that we can come back to them. And Murshid described that the breath is the tool that takes us to all the different planes of consciousness. And he even described that in the story of the night journey of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him, that the burak, or the steed, the horse, it's not really a horse, but the creature that carried Muhammad into all of the levels of existence was the breath. That the burak is the word that is used for it, but that really it's the breath. And so we are consistently invited back to grab hold of your own breath, understand the qualities, the energies that are available to you within the mastery and the implementation of your own intentional breath, and use that to take you to whatever planes of consciousness you wish to visit and work with. They're all available to us all the time. Often we discover them almost by accident, but then we realize that that is available and that we can find our way back there. I want to name a few at least. of the other reasons that people choose initiation and not just leave it in the realm of a sense of belonging or connection with community or that kind of thing. That people also, uh, I should go back, like Inayat Khan was initiated because he had a vision of his teacher that, and he was looking for his teacher for years. And so there's, and that is actually a really traditional, common story that happens a lot in Sufi culture, that someone just has a vision, like their teacher shows up to them in a dream, in a meditation, in a vision, and then they go seeking out that teacher. And the traditional Sufi stories are so widely varied, but really focused on this sense of devotion, of surrender, of a student putting themselves in the hands in the instruction field of the teacher. And so that really is how this stuff started. That is, how does someone recognize that they're on a human experience process, and there is a wealth of spiritual resource, wisdom, teachings, and energy that's available to them, and so they seek it out because there's a soul pull that is a powerful pursuit to experience that. And it's a it's a pull to surrender. It is a big draw of the heart to surrender the limitations of the human experience, the limitations of the human identification. There's so much woven into Sufism about love. Yes, we're coming to divine love, holy love, that it is the love that pulls people into the Sufi path. Not all the time, but a lot. That it's just the heart says, I need this. The heart says, I need. And so the heart pulls the individual into the Sufi path. Often people will choose initiation because they just have such a powerful experience of love for the teacher, that is the person who is embodying the teachings and who is representing this. And a student will come into the field of the teacher and just have so much love and want nothing but that. There's also the great love of God. And a lot of people who choose initiation, it's because they have a sense, a knowing, a confidence that this path will bring them into a stronger, more consistent relationship and experience with God. And whether they understand what that is or not, there is, it is not uncommon these days in Anayati Sufi lineage streams for people to have a strong sense of resonance and connection with Murshid, to see pictures of him or to hear recordings of his voice or to read his books and to have such a strong resonance with him and to want to be connected with what he brought, with who he is. And I didn't say was on purpose because there's the living vibration and that atmosphere that continues on for certainly, clearly, for generations at least. Um, when I chose to be initiated, I really didn't know what I was asking. I didn't know what I was choosing. I'm grateful that I chose it, even not understanding it. And I had asked my first teacher, that I told her that people had been asking me to lead zikr, and was it okay to do that? And she said, how wonderful. And yes, you should definitely lead zikr. And it would be a good idea to have a touchstone into the lineage. And I said, how about you? And she said, yes. It was very spontaneous. And um, though I did immediately love her when I first encountered her, that there was an immediate love that was reciprocal. And Also, then my second teacher I chose because I have a really strong sense of integrity, um, and I needed someone that I could really trust and have confidence in, and that would help me stay true to my own unfoldment with the greatest possible integrity. That I needed an honorable, um, check in person for my own accountability and resource and wisdom perspective. That um, Murshid Sam, who started out, his first Sufi teacher was Inayat Khan, but after Inayat Khan died, Murshid Sam knew that he needed to have a living teacher at all times as a check on the ego. And I agree that having a check on the ego is critically important, especially for anyone in a position of leadership, especially for anyone in a position of spiritual authority. So that's super important to me too. Most people don't choose the Sufi path because they want an honorable check-in on their ego, but that does happen as well. Um, There's also often people will choose initiation because um, there's a sense of relief from loneliness. That there is a sense of individuals pursuing the spiritual life on their own, and that can be very lonely. It can be very empowering and have a strong sense of autonomy and sovereignty for a while, but that does, for some people, move into a sense of feeling really alone in it and wanting someone to talk with and share the journey with. And I don't mean a sense of community, but an individual teacher. Okay, there are a few other reasons. There are many, many more reasons that people might choose initiation and also might choose never to take initiation. But it is a widely varied field, and people have lots of unique personal reasons for choosing what they choose. Towards the one, the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the only being, united with all the illuminated souls who form the embodiment of the Master, the Spirit of guidance. The soul, being ever perfect, the soul being an undivided portion of God that comes into human experience, for us human beings, that's the idea, that our soul is on a grand adventure, and the soul has come into this physical form and taken on the garb of this personality of the conditions of life. And the soul remains perfect throughout. The soul is experiencing life through this human incarnation, but the soul itself is untarnished and always perfect. You don't need to believe that, but that's the way that it's described in a Sufi perspective. And we, in our humanness, go through all of the experiences of this life of limitation, and it includes all of our conditioning, all of our learning, all of the bumps and bruises and scrapes and strengths and skills and tools that we develop and experience and accumulate along the way. And all of those things contribute to our personalities, to how we express ourselves and how we respond to the circumstances of life. And that's how it's supposed to be. That is the plan. That's the design of this humanness. And at some point, I'll say all of us, not necessarily all human beings, but certainly all of us who are on this call and splashing around in the Sufi waters, we get to an experience of disconnecting, of disidentifying with the human experience, disidentifying with the causes and conditions of life and our experiences. And we start to realize that we are not our limitations. We are not our woundings. We are not our reactivities. We are not the limitations of our own perspectives that have been gathered for good reason and, with lots of legitimate evidence-based experience. And that's not who we are. That who we are is the pure and perfect soul. So the spiritual life is about developing the relationship with that perfect soul, which is constantly present. There's no other way. And the more we develop that relationship with the soul, the less identified we are with the causes and conditions of the human experience. That's how it works. It's a very clean equation. Now, in Sufism, we are encouraged, instructed to bring our wisdom, our understanding, and that wider perspective, and that soul perspective into our human experience. And we don't divorce them, and we don't prioritize the soul over or instead of our human identifications and processes. We work with both, which is why Murshid described the path of the cross, that is the vertical line and the horizontal lines that intersect. And we are supposed to be striving for balance between them both, in tune with the infinite and in rhythm with life. In tune with the infinite, in rhythm with life. That doesn't mean that the human experience becomes smooth and easy and simple necessarily, but it does become less powerful when we have a wider perspective. That we all have these experiences of feeling like, when I am happy and good, when I am at peace within myself, when I have equanimity, balance, when I feel safe and strong, then circumstances in life that might otherwise be really upsetting are minor annoyances now. That doesn't mean they go away. It doesn't mean we don't notice them, but they don't affect us as powerfully as they did before. So that's what we're instructed to do. Murshid describes it lots of poetic and beautiful ways about how life is a series of jarring circumstances. That's what life in the world is. That's what happens when you come into a physical body in a physical earth plane experience. That's what happens when you're interacting with other human beings with different personalities and different values and different motives and expressions. It is not supposed to be all peace and harmony and ease and goodness all the time. That is reserved for the realm of the angels. And if we were supposed to experience life as the angels, we would have just stayed in the angelic realm and would never have been brought into this human experience. The human experience is here so we can get the benefit, so the soul can get all of these perspectives and all of the impressions from life in the world as a human being with limitations. So we work with both. And when we tune in to the infinite, with the nature of the soul, with all of the beautiful qualities of love, harmony, beauty, then we start shaping our outer personality. We start shaping the ways that we are actively moving in the world according to those higher ideals. And when we do that, we intentionally harmonize with life's circumstances. We don't force the circumstances to meet us as we are. We meet the circumstances as they are, with understanding, with wisdom, with a greater capacity for kindness and patience and tolerance. And when we do that, we are in a more powerful position to be able to invite the circumstances of life to move with us in harmony with our intentions and our ideals. So there's a symbiotic relationship that happens when we bring all of these things together intentionally. And those of us who have our capacity for wisdom and understanding, we keep strengthening that. And the more we have that, the more responsibility we have for engaging with life skillfully. When we don't have that, when we don't know any better, when we really are in ignorant dumbassery, then we only have the capacity to interact with life from our ignorant dumbassery. So we want to include more wisdom, more intelligence, more balance, more patience, more skill, because that is how we lift the vibration of all of humanity, bit by bit by little bit.